I just had a morning cup of tea with an old friend of mine, and I'm just driving back from that awesome meeting. And suddenly I was thinking about my tea. This is the first time when the barista actually gets the tea right. In the previous times, I always tried to tell them, steep it for 2 minutes, you use that much tea, it's too strong. And this morning when I walked in, suddenly I was thinking, instead of giving them all the details of how I like my coffee, what if I just walk in and say, all I want is just a weak tea, not coffee, tea, green tea. I like green tea, but I've always found that the coffee places out there always make it too strong for me. So I just walked in, relaxed, and I told the young lady there, just make it weak. Do your best, but make it weak. And you know what? This is the first time finally they got it right. And this is I've been going there on and off for several years already. So it's a long record. And it got me thinking, it's about control, isn't it? Because before I was always trying to control it. If I only tell them for that minute, it will work. And if I only tell them how much tea to put in loose leaf in my cup, it will work. And if I only tell them this, and if I only tell them that. But in the end of the day, the solution is to actually relax and not control the situation. Well, be open to accept outcomes. I was ready to accept whatever comes out, and I said to myself this morning, well, if they get it wrong, that's okay. I have a bottle of water. Next time we'll make adjustments. But the aspect of the whole thing is really relaxation, to walk in and say, do your best, let's see, and I'll adjust. If I don't like some things, I'll adjust. You don't have to spell out details. And this is why it connects to control. So many of us are used to this mindset of control. Even for those of us who don't think or admit that we are in control. Like, I don't think myself as a controlling person, but here I am. It shows up in the little things. Several months ago, I had a conversation with someone, and they said, look, you're talking about this new world and how it's going to be, and it's going to be all nice, but I don't see it. And they had a science background. There are many people with science background in my vicinity. And they said, it makes no sense. You're a scientist. You know how complicated it is. You're telling me there's a supreme being that is actually calculating every single person, what they do and how they're going to do it, and how everybody is going to be held responsible. It makes no sense. It is overly complicated scientific problem. And my answer to them was that it is not a scientific problem. We have been trained in the sciences to reduce and then look at isolated aspects of the problem and then bring them together. But in that process, in that stage of bringing things together, things could be very complicated. And that's when we say, okay, we have to simplify. Okay, we have to go only with the first order of effects, magnitude, prioritize. Everyday people say prioritize, go with the big effect and then smaller and smaller. Take, for instance, the weather people. They create these big models, and if you have the computing power, they can create even more complex models. But the solution is not more complexity. We've seen this with the AI people as well, right? Trying to build more data centers, bigger data centers. But there is a critical point beyond that. Things get too complicated. And of course, this is me speaking about, I like simplicity. This is where we talk about effortless reality. For me, if something is too complicated, this is not an encouragement to push yourself even more. If something gets too complicated, to me, that's a sign that you are getting bogged down in that rabbit hole of rational thought where you're breaking one whole picture into many, many pieces, and then you're trying to reassemble them. So you can say, well, is there other way? I know, I'm not going to even say believe. I know there is another way. Let me give you one example, and it's going to come from physics, actually. When light travels from one point to another, it actually finds the path of least time, the fastest, the shortest. And you can say, well, what's the big deal? Everybody knows that the shortest path between one point and the other is the straight line. Well, that is not so obvious because the light actually changes its speed. In air, moves the fastest. In water, it moves a little bit more slowly. In glass, it's even more slowly. So think about those guards on the beach when they actually have to scan the surface of the water and constantly watch for swimmers who might be in trouble. This is the situation. They're in the same situation as the light, because they can run, no matter how good swimmers they are, they can always run faster on the sand than actually swim in the water. So let's say you see someone drowning, and would they run along a straight line from the point where the guard point is to the person in the water? No, they will probably overshoot that entry point a little bit, increasing the amount of running and jogging, and then go in the water. At what angle, at what entry point corresponds to the shortest amount of time? Well, if you ask a lifeguard, they're probably gonna do it by intuition, by gut feeling. In the moment of adrenaline going and trying to save a person, we kind of revert to our intuitive or gut feelings and reactions. A scientist or a math person, a conventional scientist, will say, well, we can calculate, but there is no time for calculation when someone is drowning. And this is what I wanted to underscore. We're so caught up in calculations. A more complicated calculation will give us the answer. And maybe it will, with more powers, more data centers, more AI, more computers. But there is another way, because if you can actually trace the situation now, not with a lifeguard at the sea, but with the light, a beam of light going in air and then in water, and light does travel faster in air than in water, you can actually see where the light enters. And then you can do all your day calculations, a day-long calculations. And when you do the calculus or advanced calculus to figure out, actually, that is going to be more like even functional calculus, quite advanced graduate level of mathematics, to do what is the path of the minimum time, you will find eventually that the light entered the border between air and water exactly at that point. So the question then begs, how does light know? I don't know, but here it is. For me, I'm convinced that there are other laws, there are underlying laws and principles that we might have not discovered yet. That somewhere, at some place, Newton, Leibniz, discovering calculus, we learn during the rational thought centuries, we learn how to break things apart, and they work on a daily basis, breaking things apart and bringing them back in an incremental level, like first order effect, second order effect, works. It gives you the answer good enough. But there are times and places where that is not good enough, and the real calculation following those principles is very, very complicated and complex. And so that is where we need to pause. So this is my practical tip for you today. You can say, okay, this is very interesting, math, physics, light, and the principle of minimum time. By the way, this is a real name in physics. It's called the principle of minimum action. So I'm not talking about new aging concepts. I'm talking about physics. And you can say, okay, this is very interesting, but how is it applying to me? The first thing is, if something is too complicated, there's another way. You have gone down the rabbit hole. You have overcomplicated the situation. And so instead of chasing that and saying, okay, I'll work hard, twice as hard, I will brute force it, you need to actually pause and pull back from the situation and say, okay, let's go the other way. Right? This is where you start giving space to your intuition. And this is where the magic, or actually I should say the miracles, happen. In the language of A Course in Miracles, the miracles happen. This is where because the miracles in their aspect and their manifestation are simply glimpses, spikes in the fabric of the cosmos, of reality that we have to actually, we glimpse and we recognize a different reality, that there are other laws there, that we don't have to break everything apart and try to reassemble it in a super complicated way, that there are other laws that can actually get us faster, more efficient, easier to our destination. But the beginning of this process starts in the small time where you're overwhelmed with complicated details and you remember to pause and say, okay, hold on, it's too complicated. And that ties to what we are seeing today. Nowadays, I believe we are seeing the end of a world, or at least a way of living in the world, and a new world is emerging, which circles back to my conversation with that person, because that was originally the theme. I was saying we're building things, and the person was like, it's too complicated. How can you propose? Look at all the structures we have, and you're saying now you can do better structures. I don't know if the structures are going to be even the same. I don't even know how the structures will look, because you see, you don't need to see the details. You don't need to know the linear path from A to B. You don't need to do the calculation to figure out how we're going to go from this old world to this new world, because light doesn't do calculations. Light simply moves. How? This is for you and me to discover individually. I don't have an objective answer for you nowadays, but I know that the answer begins with us pausing and recognizing the lack of validity of this world. Our world is an artificially constructed world. We constructed those structures based on philosophical thought, and that philosophical thought said, break it into parts, it's simpler this way, and then put it together. But I think we have reached the point where that view doesn't work anymore, and whatever we are going to build is going to be based on a different principle, where we pause, we become still, and we let the universe rearrange itself around us, because that is what light does. And if you go and see those principles, you don't have to do anything. You just sit and nature does it for you. It's the natural principle that the light follows the minimum time. And the same way, it is the natural principle that if we actually pause in stillness for a moment, things around us will fall into their natural state of minimum effort. And that is, my friends, effortless reality.